Chapter 1: The Weight of Silence. The air in the Schwarzswald had a physical presence. It was a pressure, a heavy blanket where the chirps of birds and the scuttling of insects ought to be. It pressed on the ears, a low hum of absolute quiet that was more deafening than any noise. Lena Vogel adjusted the strap of her heavy pack, the synthetic fabric groaning in protest. The sound was an obscenity in the stillness. She paused, her breath misting in the cool morning air, and scanned the equipment readout on her wrist. The GPS signal was strong. Her biosensor registered a steady heart rate. Everything was nominal, everything except the world around her. "The EMF reader is going haywire," Ben Carter announced, his voice a theatrical boom that made Lena wince. He held a small, black device aloft like a prize. The needle on its analog display quivered erratically. "Subscribers, you are seeing this live. We are not even 2 clicks into the Schwarzswald anomaly, and we are already getting off-the-charts electromagnetic interference. What do you say to that, Fraulein Doctor?" Lena shot him a tired glance. "I say you are standing too close to the high-tension power lines we passed a kilometer ago. Ben, residual charge. It means nothing." "Or," he countered, grinning into the lens of the camera mounted on his chest harness, "it means the phantoms are powering up, getting ready for a show." Beside them, Marcus Yeager said nothing. His silence was different from the forest's. It was a conscious act, a withholding of energy. He leaned on a sturdy walking axe, its polished head gleaming dully in the weak light that filtered through the thick canopy of pine and beech. His face, weathered and creased as old leather, was a mask of grim patience. He had been against this from the start. His opposition was not vocal, but it was present in every tight line of his mouth, every slow, deliberate scan of the tree line. "Let us keep moving," Marcus said, his German accent thick and guttural. His English was precise, learned over decades of dealing with tourists and outsiders who thought the forest was a playground. "This path is old. It does not like to be trifled with." "An old path is exactly what we're here for," Lena replied, pushing a stray strand of dark hair from her face. "The Roman road, the one the locals claim the Legio IX Hispana vanished on. My paper argues it was a cartographical error, a misinterpretation of Tacitus compounded by centuries of local superstition. This expedition is to prove it. We find the original roadbed, we take LiDAR scans, and we show it leads to a known Roman settlement, not off into nowhere." "A paper," Ben scoffed, lowering his EMF reader. He tapped the side of his camera. "This is about content, Lena. It's about the experience. People don't want to read a 30-page dissertation on soil strata. They want to see us get spooked by the ghost of some poor legionary looking for his helmet." Marcus spat on the ground, a wad of tobacco juice staining the dark earth. "You will not find ghosts here. You will find bog iron, sinkholes, and widowmakers. The forest provides its own dangers. It does not need stories." Lena respected Marcus. He had guided her father on botanical surveys in these same woods 20 years ago. The man knew every trail, every poisonous fungus, every treacherous patch of marshland. But he was steeped in a tradition of fear, a collection of fireside warnings designed to keep children from wandering off. Her world was one of evidence, data, and peer review, a place for everything and everything in its place. Ghosts did not fit. They walked on. The forest floor was a soft carpet of pine needles, generations deep, that swallowed the sound of their footsteps. Above, the canopy was so dense it created a perpetual twilight. The trees were ancient, their trunks thick as columns, their bark gnarled into faces that seemed to watch with silent malevolence. Lena forced the thought from her mind. Pareidolia, the brain's tendency to see patterns where none exist. A survival mechanism, nothing more. Ben kept up a running commentary for his unseen audience, his voice a jarring intrusion. He pointed out twisted roots that he claimed were grasping claws, shadows that he insisted were lurking figures. He was a performer, and the forest was his stage. Lena tried to ignore him, focusing on the slight depression in the ground that she believed was the remnant of the Roman road's drainage ditch. Her equipment was top of the line: portable ground-penetrating radar, a high-resolution LiDAR scanner, soil density probes. Science would illuminate this place, strip away the shadows and leave only facts. An hour later, Marcus stopped dead. He held up a hand, his body rigid. "What is it?" Lena asked, her voice a low whisper. "Quiet," he commanded. Ben for once complied. He froze, his camera's lens swiveling back and forth. The oppressive silence washed back over them, heavier than before. There was nothing. No sound, no movement. "I do not hear anything," Ben whispered after a long moment. "Exactly," Marcus replied. He pointed with his axe towards a spot just off the path. "The woodpeckers, they are always in this section. Always. Today, nothing." Lena followed his gesture. A stand of rotting birch trees stood pale against the dark pines. Their bark was peppered with holes, the work of decades, but the familiar, frantic drumming was absent. The entire forest seemed to be holding its breath. She unslung her pack and pulled out a directional microphone, slipping on the attached headphones. She aimed it towards the birch grove, cranking the gain. The hiss of static filled her ears, but underneath it, nothing. The background noise of a living ecosystem was completely gone. No insect hum, no rustle of small animals, no distant bird song. It was acoustically dead. "This is unusual," she admitted, lowering the device. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. A predator nearby, perhaps, a wild boar, a lynx. "A lynx makes a sound when it moves," Marcus said, his eyes never leaving the tree line. "A boar makes a sound when it breathes. This is different." Ben's initial fear was already being replaced by excitement. EMF spikes and now a cone of silence. This is gold, absolute gold. He crept forward, camera first, towards the birch grove. "Let's get a closer look, see what's got the critters so spooked." "Ben, stop," Lena ordered. "We stick together, that was the rule." "Relax, I'm just getting a B-roll shot. The audience loves this stuff." The lone investigator braving the unknown. Marcus took a step and grabbed Ben's arm. His grip was like iron. "You will stay here. The forest has rules. You are a guest. You will show respect." Ben tried to wrench his arm away, but Marcus held firm. Their standoff was broken by a glint of metal in the dirt. Lena knelt, her scientific curiosity overriding her apprehension. She brushed away the pine needles and damp soil with her gloved fingers. It was a fibula, a Roman brooch used to fasten a cloak. It was made of bronze, shaped like a stylized eagle, its surface covered in a thick green patina, but it was unmistakably Roman. "My God," she breathed. She held it up. It was heavy, real. "This is it. This is proof. They were here." Ben forgot his argument with Marcus. He rushed over, pointing his camera at the small artifact in Lena's palm. "Incredible! A 2,000-year-old relic. We've found it. We've actually found it." "Put it back," Marcus said. His voice was low, strained. Lena looked up at him. "What? Are you serious? This is a significant find. This needs to be documented, catalogued." "You do not take things from this place," the old man insisted, his knuckles white where he gripped his axe. "It is not a museum. It is a grave. You put it back where you found it." A chill, unrelated to the air temperature, traced a path down Lena's spine. The weight of his conviction was unsettling. For a moment she considered his words. The silence, the man's fear, the ancient object in her hand, it all combined into a potent cocktail of dread. But she was a scientist. This was evidence. To leave it behind was anathema to everything she believed. "I understand your concerns, Marcus," she said, her tone conciliatory. "But this is too important. I will handle it with care. It will go to the university." She carefully placed the fibula into a padded evidence bag and sealed it. As the plastic clicked shut, a sound finally broke the forest silence. It was not the call of a bird or the snap of a twig. It was a low, mournful note, like wind blowing over the lip of a massive, empty bottle. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, a vibration in the very air. It lasted for only a second, then vanished, leaving a silence that felt deeper, more profound than before. Ben was pale, his bravado gone. What was that? Lena had no answer. She scanned the trees, her heart hammering against her ribs. The scientific part of her brain scrambled for an explanation. A geological phenomenon, wind shear, something rational. But the primal, animal part of her brain offered a simpler, more terrifying answer: a horn. Marcus raised his axe, his eyes wide. He stared into the darkening woods, not at a specific point, but at the entire forest, as if it were a single, living entity that had just stirred from a long slumber. "We have stayed too long," he whispered. "Now it knows we are here." He turned, his movements urgent. "We leave, now, back the way we came." But as Lena turned to follow, her gaze fell upon the ground. The path they had walked, the clear depression in the earth she had been following for the last hour, was gone. Before them lay only an unbroken expanse of tangled roots and thick undergrowth, as if the trail had been swallowed whole. She spun around, looking behind them. The path there was gone too. They were standing in a small, isolated clearing, surrounded on all sides by an impenetrable wall of ancient, silent trees. The GPS on her wrist began to flash a single, chilling message: no signal. Chapter 2: The Decimation Stone. Panic has a cold, metallic taste. Lena tasted it now, a bitter tang at the back of her throat. She spun in a slow circle, her boots sinking into the soft earth. The path was gone. It was not overgrown or obscured. It was absent, as if it had never existed. The familiar depression, the scuffed pine needles, the very impression of their passage had vanished. They were encircled by a seamless wall of primeval forest. "This is impossible," she muttered, more to herself than to the others. She rebooted the GPS unit on her wrist, her fingers clumsy. The screen flickered, then settled back on the same two words: no signal. Ben was hyperventilating, his camera still recording but now pointed at the ground, capturing only the frantic dance of his own boots. Where did it go? The path, where the hell did it go? This is a joke, right? You guys are messing with me. Silence. Marcus's voice cut through Ben's rising hysteria like a knife. The old guide had not moved. His axe was still held in a ready position, but his attention was not on the missing path. He was staring at a point deep within the trees, something only he could see. Getting scared is a luxury. You can afford it when you are safe. We are not safe. Lena forced down the wave of fear. She was a scientist. There was a logical explanation for this. There had to be. We got turned around, she said, her voice shaking slightly. The canopy is too thick, it's messing with the satellites. The path is still here, we lost our bearings. Even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. They had been on a straight course. A road that had existed for 2 millennia did not simply disappear. The university maps are precise, she continued, pulling a laminated paper map from a pouch on her pack. She fumbled with a compass, the needle swinging wildly before settling into a frantic, useless spin. It rotated as if it were at the magnetic North Pole. The compass. There must be a large iron deposit nearby. It's disrupting our instruments. It's the ghosts, Ben whispered, his eyes wide with terror. The EMF, the horn, they don't want us here. They're trapping us. There are no ghosts, Lena snapped, her own fear manifesting as anger. There is geology and disorientation and us panicking. She is right about the iron, Marcus said, his gaze finally breaking from the woods. He gestured with his axe towards a hulking shape half buried in the moss and ferns a few meters away. There. It was a large, rectangular block of stone, roughly the height of a man's chest. It was dark, almost black and streaked with veins of reddish-brown rust. It was clearly man-made, its edges too precise for a natural formation. It looked like an ancient altar or a boundary marker. As they approached, Lena saw carvings on its surface. They were Roman numerals and letters, eroded by centuries of exposure but still legible. Leg IXHISB, DCIMATIO, COHORSV. Lena's breath hitched. She ran a gloved hand over the cold, rough surface. Legio Nane Hispana, Decimatio Cohors Quinta, the 9th Spanish Legion, decimation, the 5th cohort. What does it mean? Ben asked, his fear momentarily replaced by morbid curiosity as he filmed the stone. Decimation, Lena explained, her voice low. It was a form of Roman military discipline, the ultimate punishment for a cohort that had shown cowardice or mutinied. The unit was divided into groups of 10, and each group drew lots. The soldier who drew the short straw was then executed by the other 9 men in his group, beaten or stoned to death by his own comrades. A heavy silence fell over the group, broken only by the low hum of Ben's camera. The missing path, the dead compass, the mournful horn, it all began to coalesce around this single, brutal word carved in stone. They did it here, Lena whispered, a horrifying realization dawning on her. Before their last battle, they punished themselves, or were punished. The fifth cohort was decimated on this spot. The stone was not a marker. It was a memorial to an act of supreme internal violence. The ground beneath their feet suddenly felt thin, brittle. Marcus walked a slow circle around the stone. He touched nothing. His eyes traced the patterns of moss and the dark, rust-colored stains that seemed to seep from the rock itself. "This stone does not belong to the forest," he said. "It is an intruder. The trees have tried to swallow it, but they cannot. There is too much pain in it. The ground here is sour." He was right. Lena noticed it now. The vegetation around the stone was sparse and sickly. The moss was a pale, unhealthy green, and the ferns were withered and brown. The very soil seemed to have been poisoned by the memory of what happened here. "We need to get our bearings," Lena said, trying to regain control. "Forget the compass. We'll use the sun." She looked up, but the canopy was a thick, uniform gray. There was no telling the sun's position. "Okay, we'll use the moss. Moss grows on the north side of trees." "A children's story," Marcus grunted. "Moss grows where the damp is. In a forest this old, that is everywhere." He pointed at a massive beech tree. Moss grew in a thick, velvety carpet all around its trunk. Every direction was north. Every direction was a lie. A sudden rustling in the undergrowth made them all freeze. It was close, too close. Ben let out a small yelp and scrambled behind the decimation stone. Marcus raised his axe, planting his feet. Lena's hand went to the canister of bear spray on her belt, though she knew it would be of little use against anything truly dangerous. The rustling grew louder, a dry, scraping sound. It was not the movement of a large animal. It was smaller, more deliberate. Then from behind a thicket of ferns a figure emerged. It was a man, or what had once been a man. He was dressed in the tattered, mud-caked remnants of a World War I German infantry uniform. His face was a sunken, hollow-eyed mask of gray flesh, and his jaw hung open in a permanent, silent scream. He ignored them completely. In his hands he held a rusted spade, and with it he began to dig. He moved with a frantic, jerky energy, his limbs twitching like a marionette. He dug a shallow trench, tossing dirt over his shoulder with methodical speed. He did not seem to be breathing. He made no sound other than the rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape of his spade against the earth and rocks. Ben's camera was shaking violently, but he kept filming. "Oh my God, oh my God, what is that? Marcus, what is that?" Marcus did not answer. He was pale, his knuckles bloodless on the handle of his axe. He had heard the stories, the warnings passed down from his grandfather, the Phantom Legion. He had never believed them, not really. But the thing in front of them was not a story. It was a tattered, mud-stained piece of history, animated by a nightmare. Lena's mind reeled. She was looking at a ghost, a tangible, visible, impossible specter. Her entire worldview, the carefully constructed edifice of logic and reason, was crumbling into dust. This was not a hallucination. They all saw it. Ben's camera was capturing it. A spectral German soldier from the Great War was digging a trench in a forest that was supposed to be haunted by Romans. "He is one of them," Marcus finally managed to say, his voice strained. "My grandfather spoke of this. He said the Legion was not alone. He said anyone who dies in these woods. The forest adds them to the roster. a new recruit for an old war. The soldier, the trench gaper, as a primal part of Lena's mind, instantly named him, continued his work, oblivious to their presence. He was carving a line in the earth, a miniature trench that snaked through the trees. He seemed to be following a pattern, a memory of a battlefield that existed only in his shattered consciousness. "We have to get out of here," Lena whispered, her voice trembling. "We have to go now." "Go where?" Ben hissed from behind the stone. "The path is gone. We're trapped with that thing." "We go away from it," Marcus said, his voice gaining a sliver of its former authority. He began to back away slowly, his axe still pointed at the digging figure. "Slowly. Do not run. Do not make a sound." Lena and Ben followed his lead, moving backwards one careful step at a time. The trench gaper did not look up. His spade continued its grim work, scraping a line between the living and the dead. They retreated 20 meters, then 30. The figure became smaller, partially obscured by the trees, but the scraping sound continued, an anchor point for their terror. They turned and began to move more quickly, half walking, half jogging through the dense, pathless woods. They scrambled over fallen logs and pushed through thorny bushes, their clothes snagging, their skin scratching. After a few minutes of frantic progress, Lena risked a glance back. The digging soldier was gone from sight. They slowed to a halt, gasping for breath, chests heaving. "Did we lose it?" Ben panted, leaning against a tree. "We did not lose anything," Marcus corrected him, his eyes scanning their new surroundings. "We just moved. In this place, that is not always a good thing." Lena's senses were on fire. Every shadow seemed to move, every twisted branch seemed to be a grasping limb. The forest was no longer a neutral collection of flora and fauna. It was an active participant. It was watching them. And then they heard a new sound. It was different from the horn, different from the digging. It was a wet, heavy, dragging sound. It was accompanied by a rhythmic, metallic clinking. It was getting closer. It sounded like a man in heavy armor, dragging a wounded leg, pulling something heavy behind him. Marcus pushed them behind a thick cluster of ancient rhododendrons. "Down," he ordered, his voice a bare whisper. "Do not move. Do not breathe." They crouched in the damp earth, peering through the thick leaves. The dragging sound grew louder and a figure shambled into view. It was a Roman legionary. His armor was dented and streaked with something dark and wet. His helmet was askew, revealing a face that was unnaturally pale, almost translucent. One of his legs was twisted at a grotesque angle, the greaves shattered, exposing gray, lifeless flesh beneath. In one hand he clutched a short sword. In the other he dragged a heavy chain. At the end of the chain was a man, or what was left of him. He wore the tattered remnants of a modern hiker's uniform. His face was a mask of frozen terror, his eyes wide and lifeless. He was clearly dead. But as the legionary dragged him past their hiding spot, the dead hiker's head turned, and his vacant eyes seemed to lock directly onto Lena's. A small, dry leaf fell from his open mouth. The Roman did not notice them. He was focused on his task, dragging his prisoner deeper into the woods, following a path that only he could see. The clinking of the chain and the wet, dragging sound receded, leaving them once again in the ringing silence. Ben was making small, choked sounds, his hand clamped over his mouth. Lena felt a profound, paralyzing cold spread through her limbs. She had come here to debunk a myth. Now she was a part of it. The fibula in her pack suddenly felt immensely heavy, a cursed object that had bought them a ticket to this private hell. The stories were true, but they were also incomplete. It was not just a Roman legion. It was a collection, a museum of death curated by the forest itself. And they were the newest potential exhibits. Marcus waited a full 5 minutes after the sounds had faded completely. He rose slowly, his face grim. "The decimation stone," he said. "We must get away from it. Its influence spreads like a sickness. It calls them." Lena nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She got to her feet, her legs unsteady. As she stood, her eyes caught something on the ground where the Roman and his captive had passed. It was a small, rectangular object, a wallet. It must have fallen from the dead hiker's pocket. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. It was soaked through with dampness but otherwise intact. She opened it. Inside was a driver's license. The face in the photo was younger, smiling, alive. The name was Stefan Richter. The expiration date was next year. Tucked behind the license was a photograph of a woman and two young children, all of them laughing in a sunlit park. A life, summarized in a few pieces of plastic and paper. A life that had ended here in the cold, silent woods. A new sound started, distant but clear. It was the sharp, metallic crack of a rifle shot. It was followed by another and then a series of them, a disciplined volley. Then came a different sound, a deep, guttural roar that was not human. It was the sound of a battle starting. Marcus grabbed her arm. "The war has begun," he said, his voice heavy with dread. "It happens every day. Now we are in the middle of the killing field." Chapter 3: The Killing Field. The gunfire was not chaotic. It was structured, rhythmic. A volley of sharp cracks from what Lena's mind, struggling to categorize the impossible, identified as bolt-action rifles. Mausers, perhaps. A pause, then another volley. It was disciplined fire directed at an unseen enemy. The sound echoed strangely through the dense woods, seeming to come from all directions at once. "We need to move," Marcus commanded, his voice low and urgent. He pulled Lena away from the wallet, from the ghost of the life it represented. Away from the shooting. Now, this way. He plunged into the undergrowth, moving with a speed and certainty that belied his age. He did not seem to be following a path, but rather an instinct, a sense of where the danger was not. Lena and Ben scrambled after him, the sounds of the spectral battle growing louder behind them. The guttural roars intensified, punctuated by what sounded like screams, high, thin, and full of agony. They ran, heedless of the branches that whipped at their faces and the thorns that tore at their clothes. The forest became a green, blurry hell. Lena's lungs burned. Her legs ached. The weight of her pack felt like an anchor dragging her down. Ben was right behind her, his breath coming in ragged, panicked sobs, the lens of his camera bouncing and capturing a chaotic montage of earth and sky. The rifle fire was joined by a new, more terrifying sound, a slow, steady, mechanical thumping. Thump, thump, thump. It was heavy, industrial, and it vibrated through the soles of their boots. It was the sound of a machine, something that had no place in this ancient forest. "What is that noise?" Ben gasped, stumbling to a halt. Marcus did not stop. "Keep moving," he yelled over his shoulder. The thumping grew louder, closer. It was accompanied by a continuous, ripping noise, like a giant tearing a sheet of canvas. It was a sound Lena had only ever heard in historical documentaries. An MG-42, a World War II German machine gun, Hitler's buzzsaw. A tree just to Lena's left suddenly exploded, splinters of wood flying through the air. A line of impact stitched across the forest floor in front of them, kicking up dirt and shredded leaves. They were being fired upon. "Down!" Marcus bellowed, tackling Lena and driving her to the ground behind a massive, moss-covered fallen log. Ben dove after them, landing with a painful grunt. They peered over the log. Through the trees they could see it. It was not a full person. It was a flickering, semi-transparent apparition consisting of a Wehrmacht helmet, two ghostly hands, and the machine gun they gripped. The rest of the body was absent. It was just a floating weapon of war, spitting a stream of spectral tracer rounds that shredded the air. The glare. It was firing at something deeper in the woods, something they could not see. But its field of fire was directly over their heads. "We're pinned," Ben whimpered, pressing his face into the damp earth. "We're pinned down." The spectral Mauser fire answered the machine gun from another direction. Ghostly bullets crisscrossed in the air above their shelter. They were caught in a crossfire between two invisible phantom armies. Lena could smell it now, a phantom scent on the air, the acrid tang of cordite, the smell of hot metal and spent gunpowder. "They are not shooting at us," Marcus said, his voice tight. He pointed towards the direction the machine gun was firing. "They are shooting at them." Lena followed his gesture. For a moment she saw nothing but trees. Then the forest seemed to shimmer, to resolve itself. A line of figures was advancing through the woods. They were legionaries, dozens of them. They moved in perfect formation, their large rectangular shields, their scuda, held locked together to form a solid wall. Their short swords, their gladii, were held at the ready. They did not run. They marched forward with a slow, inexorable purpose, a river of ghostly bronze and iron flowing through the trees. At their head was the legionary from before, the one with the shattered leg, now moving with no sign of injury. He no longer dragged his captive. He was a soldier in formation. The machine gun tracers slammed into the shield wall. The impacts made no sound, but each one caused the legionaries' forms to flicker and distort, like a bad television signal. Yet they did not slow. They simply absorbed the punishment and continued their relentless advance. "This is insane," Lena breathed, her mind refusing to process the scene. Romans versus Wehrmacht. History's nightmares unleashed in a bloody, spectral theater. "We have to move," Marcus repeated, his eyes darting around looking for an escape. "If we stay here, we will be overrun or hit by a stray shot." "Move where?" Ben cried, his voice cracking. "There's a freaking ghost Nazi with a machine gun in front of us and a Roman ghost army behind us. We're screwed." It was then that Lena saw it. A small, dark opening in the side of a low hillock 50 meters to their left, partially concealed by a curtain of ivy. A cave, or perhaps the entrance to an animal's den. It was their only chance of cover. "There," she said, pointing. "Marcus, there." Marcus's eyes followed her finger. He nodded grimly. "It is our only way. On my signal, we run. Do not stop for anything. Go." He didn't wait for an answer. He vaulted over the log and sprinted towards the opening. Lena was a second behind him, her muscles screaming in protest. She ran with her head down, not daring to look at the spectral battle raging around her. The air was cold where the phantom bullets passed. She could feel them, a trail of icy dread against her skin. Ben was the last to move. He hesitated for a split second, trying to frame the perfect shot of the advancing Romans. It was a fatal mistake. As he pushed himself up, a new sound entered the fray, the wet, sickening thwack of a spear finding its mark. It was a pilum, the heavy Roman javelin, thrown from the advancing line. It materialized from the ghostly air and struck Ben square in the chest. He made no sound. His eyes went wide with shock and pain. The camera on his chest captured a final, dizzying view of the canopy before he fell backwards, the spectral spear protruding from his sternum. He lay still, his limbs splayed at unnatural angles. "Ben!" Lena screamed, her voice raw. She stopped, turning to go back for him. Marcus grabbed her arm, his grip unforgiving, and hauled her forward. "He is gone. We cannot help him. Move." He dragged her the last 20 meters, shoving her through the ivy and into the dark opening. She fell onto the hard-packed dirt of the cave floor, scraping her hands and knees. Marcus tumbled in after her, panting, his face a mask of grief and fury. The sounds of the battle were muffled now, distant. The small cave was dark and smelled of damp earth and something else, something musky and animal. They were safe, for the moment. But the image of Ben, lying on the forest floor with a phantom spear in his chest, was burned into Lena's mind. She began to sob deep, racking sobs of terror and loss. Ben, the loud, obnoxious, infuriating man, was dead, killed by a ghost. Marcus let her cry for a minute, his own ragged breathing slowly returning to normal. Then he put a heavy hand on her shoulder. "We have no time for this. We must see what this place is." He pulled a small, powerful flashlight from his belt and flicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow, natural tunnel leading deeper into the hill. The walls were damp earth and rock, laced with a thick web of roots. As Marcus panned the light around, it fell on something in the corner. It was a skeleton, a very large one. It was not human. It was the skeleton of a bear, picked clean and ancient. But something was wrong with it. Its ribcage was grotesquely expanded and its skull was elongated. And growing from its spine and antlers were antlers. The skeleton was of a cave bear, but it had the antlers of a massive stag fused to its bones. It was a biological impossibility, a monstrous hybrid that could never have existed. "What in God's name?" Lena whispered, her tears forgotten, replaced by a new, more profound horror. Before Marcus could answer, a new sound came from outside. The battle was fading, the gunfire and screams dying away, but they were replaced by something else. A low, rhythmic chanting in Latin and footsteps, hundreds of them marching in unison. They were coming closer. They were stopping right outside the cave entrance. Then a new sound began, a slow, dragging noise, the sound of a body being pulled through the dirt. It stopped. A moment of silence. Then Ben's voice, tinny and distorted as if coming from a broken speaker, echoed from just outside the cave. "Guys, Lena, Marcus, are you in there? It's okay now, they're not so bad, they just want us to join them. It doesn't even hurt for long, come on out, we're filming the finale." Lena clamped her hands over her ears, shaking her head. It couldn't be. It was a trick, a hallucination. A shadow fell over the entrance to the cave. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the dim light of the forest. It was Ben. He was standing, the spectral pilum still embedded in his chest. His skin was pale and translucent, and his movements were jerky, unnatural. His camera was still on his harness, its red recording light blinking steadily. He flickered and distorted like a faulty hologram, a glitch in the fabric of reality. "Come on," the glitch hiker that was Ben said, his voice a dead, flat monotone. He raised a hand and beckoned them forward. "The legate wants to see the new recruits." Chapter 4: The Unbroken. The thing that wore Ben's face took a step into the cave. Its movements were wrong, a grotesque parody of life. Its joints seemed to bend at slightly incorrect angles, and its feet hovered a centimeter above the ground. The spectral pilum in its chest shed a faint, cold light, illuminating the wisps of mist that clung to its translucent form. "Ben, no," Lena whispered, scrambling backwards deeper into the tunnel. Her back hit the cold, damp wall. There was nowhere else to go. Marcus moved to stand between her and the apparition. He held his axe not like a tool but like a weapon, its heavy head angled towards the ghostly figure. "Get back," he growled, his voice a low rumble of defiance. The Ben thing stopped. It tilted its head, an expression of mild curiosity on its flickering face. The camera on its chest swiveled to focus on Marcus. "This unit is designated hostile," it said, its voice the same dead, electronic monotone. "Resistance is inefficient. The cohort assimilates. It is the protocol." "You are not Ben," Marcus stated, his knuckles white on the axe handle. "You are just a puppet, a hollow thing." "Identity is a temporary data set," the creature replied. "This unit's former designation was Ben Carter. Its current designation is Recruit 734. All sensory input is still being archived. The content is excellent." It raised a hand and gestured vaguely outside. "The legate is waiting. He is impatient." From outside the cave, a new voice spoke. It was powerful, resonant, and carried an inherent authority that chilled Lena to the bone. The language was Latin, but the meaning was unmistakable. It was a command. The Ben thing flinched, a full-body tremor that made its form distort violently. "Compliance," it stammered, its own voice momentarily overridden by a burst of static. It turned and shuffled out of the cave entrance, disappearing from view. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. Lena and Marcus stayed frozen, listening. The rhythmic marching began again, moving away from the cave. The sounds of the spectral army receded into the forest, leaving only the oppressive quiet behind. "Is it gone?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. "For now," Marcus replied, slowly lowering his axe. He was shaking, a fine tremor in his powerful hands. "They are moving on, but they know we are here. They will be back." He turned and shone his flashlight deeper into the tunnel. "We cannot stay at the entrance. We must go deeper, find another way out." Lena hesitated, her gaze fixed on the monstrous antlered bear skeleton in the corner. "What about that? What is it?" "It is a warning," Marcus said grimly. "A warning that the soldiers are not the only wrongness in this forest. Now move." Reluctantly, she followed him into the narrow passage. The air grew colder, heavier. The walls closed in, the damp earth pressing against their shoulders. The beam of Marcus's flashlight cut a lonely path through the absolute blackness. The tunnel twisted and turned, sloping gently downwards. After what felt like an eternity, it opened into a larger cavern. This was not a natural cave. The walls were hewn from the rock, rough but clearly worked by hand. The ceiling was low, supported by thick wooden beams that were black with age and moisture. In the center of the chamber was a stone well, its opening covered by a rotting wooden lid. All around the walls were niches carved into the rock. Inside each niche was a human skull. There were dozens of them. Some were bleached white, others were green with moss, but all of them stared out with empty, accusing sockets. "It's a Mithrium," Lena breathed, her academic mind momentarily taking over from her terror. She ran her hand along the carved wall. "A secret Roman temple for the worship of the god Mithras. They were common in military outposts. The Legion. They built this." Marcus shone his light on the well, and this. "The ritual well, for ablutions, maybe sacrifices." She knelt and peered at the rotting lid. There were carvings on it almost completely worn away. A sun, a moon, a dagger, the symbols of the Mithraic mysteries. A sound from the tunnel they had just left made them both freeze. A faint scraping. It was getting closer. "They came back," Marcus whispered, raising his axe. "There's no other way out," Lena said, her eyes darting around the chamber. They were trapped. The tunnel was their only entrance and exit. The scraping grew louder. It was not the sound of marching feet. It was the sound of something being dragged. A figure appeared in the tunnel entrance. It was not a soldier. It was tall and unnaturally thin, its limbs long and spidery. Its body seemed to be made of wet black peat and pale white fungus, its form shifting and dripping as it moved. It had no discernible face, only a smooth, blank expanse where features should be. The silent man of the fen. It paused, its featureless head tilting as if sensing them. Marcus let out a string of curses in German, his face ashen. "The bog man, the eater of sorrow, grandfather warned." The creature flowed into the chamber, its movements utterly silent. It was not walking, it was oozing forward. The air around it grew frigid. Lena felt a wave of utter despair wash over her, a deep, soul-crushing hopelessness that sapped her will to move, to fight, to live. She wanted to lie down on the cold stone floor and never get up again. Marcus grunted, fighting the psychic assault. "It feeds on fear," he gasped, his teeth gritted. "Do not let it in your head." The silent man raised a long, dripping arm, pointing a finger-like tendril at Lena. As it did, the skulls in the walls began to vibrate, chattering against the stone, a clattering chorus of ancient dead. Suddenly, a brilliant light flooded the chamber from the tunnel entrance. It was not the warm light of a torch, but a cold, harsh, silver-white light. 3 figures stood silhouetted in the entrance. They were legionaries, but they were different from the others they had seen. They were not flickering or translucent. They seemed solid, corporeal, their bronze armor gleaming as if freshly polished. In the center stood a tall, imposing man whose ornate helmet was adorned with a crest of scarlet horsehair. His breastplate was molded to the shape of a muscular torso, and a fine crimson cloak was draped over his shoulders. Legate Lucius Cassian Verus, the Unbroken. He took a step into the Mithrium, his hobnailed sandals clicking on the stone floor. The two legionaries with him held their shields and pila at the ready. They ignored Lena and Marcus completely. Their attention was fixed on the silent man. The legate spoke, his voice echoing with command. It was Latin, but the tone was universal. Creatura nemoris recede, hic locus mus est. Creature of the forest, withdraw, this place is mine. The silent man let out a silent hiss, a wave of pure misery that made Lena's vision swim. The chattering of the skulls intensified. It took a shuffling step towards the Romans. The legionary on the legate's right did not wait for an order. He snapped his pilum forward in a perfect, practiced motion. The heavy spear flew through the air and struck the creature in its chest. There was no impact, no spray of blood. The spear simply passed through the bog thing's form and clattered against the far wall. The silent man was intangible. The creature surged forward, its form dissolving into a cloud of black mist and white spores. It enveloped the legionary. The soldier stood rigid for a moment, his form visible through the swirling cloud. Then he simply dissolved. His armor, his shield, his bones, they all crumbled into a fine gray dust that rained down onto the floor. The second legionary recoiled, a flicker of what might have been fear crossing his spectral face. But the legate did not move. He watched the silent man reform, its shape now slightly larger, more solid. It had fed. "Your tricks do not work on me, filth," the legate said, his voice calm and laced with contempt. He raised a hand, and in it materialized a gladius. The short sword burned with the same cold, silver light as his armor. "I am bound by duty. You are bound only by hunger. My will is stronger." He advanced on the creature. The silent man seemed to hesitate. It sensed a different kind of power in the Roman commander, something it could not easily consume. With a final, frustrated hiss that felt like a spike of ice in Lena's brain, the bog thing flowed backwards, retreating into a crack in the far wall and vanishing into the rock. The Mithrium was silent again, save for the pile of gray dust on the floor where a Roman soldier had stood a moment before. The legate, Verus, slowly turned his head. His gaze fell upon Lena and Marcus. The face beneath the helmet was aristocratic, severe, with a strong jaw and eyes that seemed to burn with a cold, ancient fire. He looked at them not as a man looks at other people, but as a man looks at livestock, or vermin. He ran his eyes over their strange clothes, their modern gear. He took in Lena's terror and Marcus's defiance. "Barbari," he said, the word a simple statement of fact. "Barbarians." He gestured with his glowing sword towards the pile of dust. "My soldier is gone. His duty is eternal, but his form is forfeit. A replacement is required." His burning eyes settled on Marcus. He assessed the old guide's strong frame, the axe in his hands, the fight still in his eyes. You have the look of a warrior. You will serve. You will take his place in the line. It is an honor you do not deserve, but one you will accept. Marcus spat on the floor. I serve no one, especially not a dead man. Varus's expression did not change. It was a mask of supreme, unassailable authority. Death is a temporary inconvenience. Duty is eternal. You will learn the distinction. He took a step towards them. The remaining legionary moved to flank him. They were trapped. Before them was a ghost of immense power, a commander who had held his legion together for 2,000 years. Behind them was a tunnel that led to a forest full of other horrors. There was no escape. No, Lena said, her voice surprisingly steady. She took a step forward, placing herself in front of Marcus. You can't. We are not part of your war. Varus's gaze shifted to her. He seemed to look straight through her, assessing her not as a person but as a collection of strengths and weaknesses. The woman, you have the stink of knowledge about you. You read the stone. You know our name. He pointed his gladius at her. What is your purpose here, barbarian? Why do you trespass in my castra? This isn't a camp, Lena replied, her mind racing. Logic, reason, those were her weapons. She had to try to use them. This is a forest. Your war ended 2,000 years ago. You are an echo, a memory trapped in this place. A flicker of something, amusement, irritation, crossed the legate's face. The war is never over. The enemy is always at the gates. We are the shield. We are the wall. We have held this frontier for 20 centuries against the horrors of this land. He gestured to the crack where the silent man had vanished. We fight them so that Rome does not have to. That is our duty. That is our curse. He took another step, his presence filling the small chamber. The air grew heavy, charged with his immense will. You have intruded. You have disturbed the balance. You carry an artifact of my legion. His eyes bored into her pack as if he could see the bronze fibula through the canvas. You will be judged, and you will be found wanting. The legionary beside him raised his pilum. This was it. This was how it ended. In a forgotten tomb at the hands of a long-dead Roman general. But before Varus could give the final order, another voice echoed from the tunnel. It was German, crisp and cultured, with a sneering, arrogant edge. Always so dramatic, Lucius, still playing the noble guardian after all these years. It is tiresome. A new figure stepped into the Mithrium, and the cold dread in Lena's veins turned to ice. He wore the immaculate black uniform of a Nazi SS officer, complete with a silver skull on his cap. He was handsome in a severe, angular way, and he moved with a predator's grace. He was spectral like the others, but his form was sharp, stable, defined by the sheer force of his malevolent personality. Sturmbannführer Eugen Schmidt, the usurper. He smiled, a thin, cruel slash of a mouth. Do not mind me. I just came to offer our new guests a more modern perspective on their situation. Chapter 5. A more modern perspective. Sturmbannführer Eugen Schmidt moved with an unnatural fluidity, his polished black boots making no sound on the stone floor. He stopped beside the stone well, placing a gloved hand on its rotting cover, and gesture of casual ownership. He radiated an aura of cold, controlled menace that was entirely different from Varys's ancient, rigid authority. Varys was a monolith of duty. Schmidt was a serpent of ambition. Varys turned his head slowly, his plumed helmet never dipping. The silver light from his gladius seemed to dim slightly in Schmidt's presence, as if the chamber now contained two opposing poles of power. "Schmidt," Varys said, his voice flat and filled with contempt, "you are out of your jurisdiction. This is a holy site of the Legion. Your filth is not welcome here." Schmidt gave a low chuckle, a sound like dry leaves skittering over pavement. "My jurisdiction is wherever I choose it to be, Legate. That is the beauty of our condition. We are not bound by your archaic maps and borders. We are bound only by will." He tapped a finger on his temple. "And my will is far more flexible than yours." His eyes, the color of a winter sky, slid over to Lena and Marcus. He offered a slight, mocking bow. "Sturmbenführer Eugen Schmidt at your service. Please, forgive the theatricality of my Roman colleague. He is a product of a simpler, more brutal time. He understands only conquest and discipline. And you understand only betrayal and decay," Varys countered, his grip tightening on his sword. The remaining legionary beside him shifted his stance, his shield held ready. Schmidt ignored him, his focus entirely on the two living humans. "You see, you have stumbled into a political disagreement, you might say, a philosophical schism. The legate here believes we are doomed to repeat our final battle for eternity, a pointless, grinding war against the forest's native pests." He gestured vaguely towards the wall where the silent man had vanished. "He calls it duty. I call it a failure of imagination." Lena stared, her mind struggling to comprehend the scene. Two ghosts, a Roman general and a Nazi officer, were having a political debate in a subterranean temple, while she and Marcus stood as the terrified audience. "What do you want?" Marcus growled, taking a protective step in front of Lena. Schmidt's smile widened. "An excellent question, direct. I appreciate that. What I want is progress." He began to circle the well, his movements smooth and predatory. "For 70 years since my recruitment, I have studied our situation. This place, this forest, is a nexus of incredible power, a wound in reality. The legate uses this power to maintain a stalemate. He keeps his legionaries marching, fighting, dying, and rising again in the same pointless loop. He is a warden of his own prison." He stopped and leaned towards them, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I, on the other hand, see the potential. This cohort, this anachronistic collection of warriors you have witnessed, it is the most powerful military force on Earth, a legion of the undying. Imagine what could be accomplished if it were led by a commander with vision, a modern commander, not one who seeks to hold a line, but one who seeks to redraw the map." The implication was horrifying. He didn't want to end the curse. He wanted to weaponize it. "You are mad," Lena breathed. "Am I?" Schmidt straightened up, a look of genuine surprise on his face. "Is it mad to desire an end to this stagnation? Is it mad to want to break the cycle? The legate's way offers you only death or slavery in his ranks. I am offering you a third option." "We want no part of your plans," Marcus said. "We want only to leave." "Of course you do," Schmidt said soothingly. "And I can help you with that. Unlike the legate, I have spent decades exploring the more esoteric properties of our condition. I know the forest's hidden paths. I know the blind spots in the legate's patrols. I can guide you out. Varus let out a short, sharp laugh. He will guide you to a shallow grave, barbarians. He is a serpent. His every word is a lie coated in honey. And his are threats coated in bronze, Schmidt retorted without looking at him. So you have a choice. A swift, honorable death at the hands of this relic leading to an eternity of servitude, or a chance at freedom guided by me. The choice seems rather obvious, does it not? What is your price? Lena asked, her voice sharp. She knew there was a price. Men like Schmidt always had a price. Schmidt's eyes gleamed with appreciation. Ah, the scholar, always looking for the subtext. You are correct, Fräulein Vogel. There is a small price, a simple exchange of services. He paused for dramatic effect. I need you to retrieve something for me, something the legate guards very carefully, something he does not understand the true power of. The Aquila, Varus stated, his voice a low growl. The silver light of his sword flared. He means the eagle of the ninth. He wishes to defile it. Defile it, Schmidt scoffed. I wish to liberate it. You treat it as a mere symbol, a rallying point for your spectral puppets. I know what it truly is. It is not just the standard of your legion, Lucius. It is the linchpin of the entire curse. It is the antenna, the focusing lens for all the power in this forest. In the right hands, it could be used to take command of the entire cohort, or perhaps to destroy it utterly and set us all free. He looked directly at Lena. He keeps it in the praetorium, the ruins of his command tent at the very center of the camp. It is the most heavily guarded place in this forest. He and his personal guard can never stray far from it. But you are alive. You are flesh and blood. You operate on a different frequency. You can move through his patrols in ways my own men cannot. You can get to it. It was a classic prisoner's dilemma. Two monstrous choices, each promising potential salvation and certain damnation. Trust the honorable tyrant who wanted to enslave them, or the manipulative traitor who wanted to use them as pawns in his coup. Before Lena could answer, the ground beneath their feet trembled. A low groan echoed from deep within the earth. The skulls in the walls rattled, and a fine dust sifted down from the ceiling. Varus and Schmidt both looked alarmed. The shared moment of concern was more terrifying than their conflict. The forest awakens, Varus said, his gaze turning towards the ceiling. The tremors are more frequent. Your endless, pointless war is shaking the foundations of our prison, legate, Schmidt snarled. Soon there will be nothing left but rubble. The ground shook again, more violently this time. A large crack appeared in the stone floor, racing from the wall to the edge of the well. The rotting wooden lid covering the well splintered, a section of it collapsing inwards with a splash from the dark water below. From the blackness of the well, a thick green tendril like a vine made of slime snaked out and slapped against the stone floor. It was followed by another and another. Something was climbing out. The well, Lena stammered. It's not just for water, it's a gate. He is not the only ancient thing you have angered, legate, Schmidt said, taking a prudent step back from the well. Varus raised his glowing sword. This is my sanctum, Nothing defiles it. The thing that emerged from the well was a horror of tangled roots and river weed, a vaguely humanoid shape formed from the muck and filth at the bottom of the world. Its head was a gnarled burl of wood, and in its center, a single, malevolent eye of glowing green phosphorescence opened and fixed on them. Its mouth, a lipless slit in the wood, opened and emitted a guttural shriek, a sound of pure, mindless rage. It was a Wurzelworm, a root worm, a manifestation of the forest's deepest, most septic anger. It lunged, not at Lena or Marcus, but at the nearest source of spectral energy. It swiped at Schmidt with a thick, root-like claw. The SS officer dissolved into black smoke a second before the blow landed, his form reappearing across the chamber with a contemptuous sneer. The creature's attention then turned to Varus. The legate stood his ground, his face a mask of grim determination. "Warrior!" he roared and charged, his silver sword held high. He brought the blade down on the creature's shoulder. The sword cut deep, but there was no blood, only the splintering of rotten wood and the release of a foul, swampy odor. The Wurzelworm shrieked again and swung a massive, club-like fist, forcing the legate to step back. This was their chance. While the two powers were engaged, they had a sliver of an opportunity. "Lena now!" Marcus yelled, grabbing her arm and pulling her towards the tunnel. They scrambled back the way they had come, the sounds of the battle in the Mithrium echoing behind them. The legate's Latin war cries, the creature's enraged shrieks, and Schmidt's mocking laughter overlaying it all. They burst out of the cave entrance into the dim forest light, gasping for air. They did not stop. They ran blindly, desperately, away from the hill and the horrors it contained. They did not know where they were going. They only knew they had to get away. Away from the legate who wanted their souls, away from the officer who wanted their obedience, and away from the ancient, nameless things that wanted only their flesh. They ran until their legs gave out, finally collapsing in a heap at the base of a giant, moss-covered oak. Lena's body screamed in protest, every muscle aching, her lungs on fire. For several minutes they lay there, the silence of the forest once again pressing in on them, a silence that was no longer empty, but full of unseen, watching things. Lena finally pushed herself up. "We need a plan," she said, her voice hoarse. "We can't just keep running." Marcus wiped a sleeve across his dirty, sweat-streaked face. "There is no plan. We are mice in a cage with two starving cats. We are already dead. We just have not stopped moving yet." "No," Lena insisted, a spark of defiance flaring within her. "Schmidt was right about one thing. We are alive. That makes us different. It gives us an advantage. We just need to figure out what it is." She looked at her pack, at the scientific instruments that now seemed like children's toys. Then her hand went to the small, hard shape of the bagged fibula, an artifact of the Legion, a key, perhaps, or just the bait that had led them into the trap. As she touched it, a new sound reached them. It was faint, distant, music. A thin, reedy tune played on a piper's fife. It was a simple, repetitive melody, and it was unnervingly cheerful. The tune grew slowly louder, weaving through the trees, a siren's song in the heart of a nightmare. The Landsknecht piper. He was hunting, and the music was his lure. Chapter 6. The Piper's Tune. The fife music was a profound violation. It did not belong in the crushing, watchful silence of the Schwarzswald. It was a jaunty, lilting tune, a simple marching ditty that a soldier might whistle on a long road. Yet here, in the perpetual twilight under the suffocating canopy, it was monstrous. The melody slithered through the trees, a cheerful serpent of sound that promised madness. "What is that?" Lena whispered, her voice rough. She pushed herself away from the oak tree, her body a single, bruised ache. Marcus was already on his feet, his face a mask of exhausted vigilance. He scanned the dense woods, his head cocked. "A lure. Do not listen to it. Cover your ears." Lena pressed her hands tight against her ears, but it did little good. The music was not just an auditory phenomenon. It was a vibration that seemed to penetrate the skull, resonating directly with the bones of her inner ear. It was insidious, bypassing her defenses. The simple, repetitive notes began to worm their way into her thoughts, pushing aside the fear and panic, replacing them with a strange, hollow placidity. "It's a nice tune," a part of her brain thought. "A happy tune. It would be good to walk to it, just follow the music. It leads somewhere pleasant, somewhere safe." "Lena!" Marcus's voice was a distant shout distorted by the pressure on her ears. He shook her shoulder hard. The physical jolt was enough to break the spell. The placid feeling shattered and the cold terror rushed back in, a welcome, familiar sensation. She stumbled back, shaking her head to clear the last of the melody's influence. "It gets inside your head." "It wants you to walk," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the trees. "It wants you to follow right into a patrol." He pointed to the ground. "Look." Lena followed his gaze. The soft earth was disturbed. There were tracks here, but not their own. They were the prints of hobnailed sandals, dozens of them, all heading in the same direction, a silent testament to a recent Roman patrol. The piper's music was designed to herd prey into the path of the hunters. The melody grew louder, closer. It was coming from their left. Marcus grabbed her arm and pulled her in the opposite direction, forcing them into a stumbling, painful run. They pushed through thick ferns and scrambled over moss-slicked rocks, the cheerful, maddening tune pursuing them relentlessly. It was like being chased by a demented ice cream truck. The terrain began to change. The ground grew softer, spongier. The air thickened with the smell of decay, of wet, rotting vegetation. The massive pines and beeches gave way to stunted, skeletal-looking birches and willows that grew in twisted clumps from the marshy ground. They were entering a bog. The fife music began to recede, as if its player was unwilling or unable to follow them into the fen. But the sense of relief was short-lived. The silence that replaced the music was somehow worse, charged with a new and different kind of menace. The ground squelched under their boots, and with every step, foul-smelling bubbles of methane broke the surface of the stagnant pools around them. "We cannot stay here," Marcus said, his voice a low pant. He pulled his boot out of a patch of sucking mud. "The ground is not stable, and there are other things in the bogs." He did not need to specify what he meant. Lena's mind immediately went to the image of the silent man. They slowed their pace, carefully picking their way from one solid-looking patch of earth to the next. The fog began to roll in, a thick, white miasma that rose from the brackish water, clinging to the ground and reducing visibility to a few meters. They were moving through a gray, featureless world, the gnarled shapes of the dead trees appearing and disappearing like phantoms in the mist. It was in this disorienting fog that they saw the light. It was a small, warm, yellow glow, bobbing gently in the distance. A lantern. It swung back and forth with the gentle rhythm of someone walking. It was the first sign of warmth and life they had seen in what felt like an eternity. "Hello," Lena called out, her voice sounding small and weak in the vast, misty expanse. "Is someone there? We need help." The light stopped moving. It hovered in place for a long moment. Then it began to move towards them. "Be careful," Marcus warned, his hand tightening on his axe. "Nothing in this forest is what it seems." As the light grew closer, they could make out the figure holding it. It was a man, stooped and old, dressed in the rough, homespun clothes of a 19th-century traveler or woodsman. He held a simple tin lantern, the candle inside casting a pool of welcome light around him. His face was deeply wrinkled and framed by a shaggy, white beard. He looked like a character from a Grimm's fairy tale. He stopped a few meters away, holding the lantern up. The light cast deep shadows on his face, but his eyes seemed to twinkle with a gentle concern. "Lost are we children?" he asked, his voice a reedy quaver. His German was archaic, a dialect from centuries past. "It is not a good night to be wandering the fen. The spirits are abroad." "We're trying to get out of the forest," Lena said, relief washing over her. He was just an old man. Maybe another ghost, but he didn't seem hostile. "Can you help us? Do you know the way?" The old man, the lantern man, nodded slowly. "I know all the ways of this wood, the safe paths and the dangerous ones, the paths the Legion walks and the paths they fear." He beckoned with a gnarled hand. "Come, follow my light. I will lead you to a place of safety, a place even the Romans will not go." Marcus looked skeptical. "What place is that?" "There is a clearing," the old man said, his eyes twinkling. "A circle of old stones, older than the Romans, older than the trees. The Legion's power ends at its border. They cannot cross. It is a sanctuary. I will take you there." It was too good to be true. But what choice did they have? To stay in the bog was to risk sinking into the mire or encountering the silent man. To go back was to face the Piper and the Legion. The old man and his promised sanctuary were their only hope. "Thank you," Lena said, her voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you." They followed him. The lantern man moved with a surprising speed, his light bobbing ahead of them, a beacon in the disorienting fog. He led them on a winding path through the bog, seemingly knowing every solid patch of ground. Lena felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since she had pocketed the fibula. Maybe they could survive this. Maybe this old man was a benevolent spirit, a guardian of the forest who helped the lost. After about 20 minutes of walking, the ground began to grow firm again. The fog thinned, and the skeletal birches were replaced by the familiar, towering pines. The lantern man led them up a gentle slope and into a large, circular clearing. And just as he had promised, the clearing was ringed by a series of tall, upright stones, their surfaces covered in moss and faint, spiraling carvings. It was a Neolithic stone circle, ancient and powerful. "Here we are," the old man announced, a note of triumph in his reedy voice. The safe zone, as some of the newer ones have come to call it. Within this circle, you are beyond the legate's reach. He cannot touch you here. Lena let out a long, shuddering breath. She stepped past the first stone and into the circle. The air inside was different. The oppressive weight of the forest was gone. The air was lighter, cleaner. The sense of being constantly watched had vanished. It was like stepping from a pressure chamber into the open air. "It's real," she said, turning to Marcus, a wide smile of relief on her face. He was telling the truth. Marcus stepped into the circle, his own grim expression softening slightly. He leaned on his axe, his shoulders slumping as some of the tension finally left his body. The lantern man stood just outside the circle of stones, a strange smile on his wrinkled face. "I have brought you to safety, as promised. Now I must be on my way. There are always others who are lost in the fog." "Wait," Lena said. "Who are you?" The old man's smile widened, but it no longer reached his eyes. "I am just a poor soul who lost his way in these woods a long, long time ago. I do my best to help others avoid my fate." He gave a small, courtly bow. "Enjoy the sanctuary." With that, he turned and shuffled back into the trees, his lantern's light dwindling until it was swallowed by the darkness. Lena and Marcus were alone in the center of the stone circle. It was quiet here, a peaceful quiet, not the dead, predatory silence of the forest. Lena dropped her pack to the ground and sat down, her legs refusing to support her for another second. "We made it," she said. "We're safe." Marcus did not answer. He was walking the perimeter of the circle, his eyes fixed on the ground just inside the ring of stones. He knelt, his fingers tracing something in the dirt. "What is it?" Lena asked. "Footprints," he said, his voice low and tight. "Many of them, all leading to the center of the circle, none of them leading out." A cold knot of dread formed in Lena's stomach, undoing all her relief. She got up and walked over to where he was kneeling. He was right. The soft earth was covered in footprints of all shapes and sizes. Some were from hiking boots, others from simple shoes, and some were the faint impressions of bare feet. They all pointed inwards. It was then that she noticed the smell. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A smell of cloying sweetness, like rotting flowers and spoiled meat. It seemed to be coming from the very center of the clearing. Slowly, her heart beginning to pound a heavy, sick rhythm against her ribs, she walked towards the center of the stone circle. Marcus rose and followed her, his axe held at the ready. The sweet, sickly smell grew stronger. In the exact center of the clearing, the grass grew taller and greener than anywhere else, and hidden within the grass was a small, dark pond. It was no more than 3 meters across, perfectly circular, its surface as still and black as polished obsidian. The stilling pond. Lena stared at it, a primal fear creeping up her spine. The pond was utterly black, reflecting nothing of the sky or the surrounding stones. It was a hole in the world. As she watched, a single large bubble rose from its depths and broke the surface with a soft, wet pop, releasing a fresh wave of the sickeningly sweet odor. "The lantern man," Lena whispered, a horrifying realization dawning on her. "He didn't lead us here for safety." "No," Marcus said, his eyes wide with horror as he stared at the black water. He led us here for him. A shape began to resolve itself on the other side of the pond. It rose from the ground like a heat haze, a tall, thin figure that seemed to be made of shadow and despair. Its form was indistinct, its edges blurred, but its presence was a vortex of absolute cold and hopelessness. The silent man of the fen. The lantern man had not saved them from the legion. He had herded them like sheep into the personal larder of another, older horror. This was not a sanctuary. It was a feeding ground. And the stones were not there to keep the legion out. They were there to keep the silent man's meals in. The creature's featureless head tilted towards them. It raised a long, thin arm. It did not need to chase them. It did not need to fight. It just needed to wait. They were trapped in its cage, and all it had to do was wait for their hope to curdle into the despair it fed upon. And as Lena looked at the black, unreflecting water of the pond, and then at Marcus's grim, defeated face, she realized it would not have to wait for very long. Chapter 7. The Taste of Despair. Time ceased to have meaning in the stone circle. The perpetual twilight of the forest canopy above gave no indication of the sun's passage. There was only the oppressive gray light, the ring of ancient, silent stones, and the two figures trapped within. One man, one woman, and the thing that waited for them on the other side of the black pond. The silent man did not move. It stood like a statue sculpted from solidified despair, a null point in the fabric of the clearing. It did not need to be aggressive. Its very presence was an attack, a psychic poison that seeped into the air, into their lungs, into their minds. Lena sat with her back against one of the cold, moss-covered stones, her arms wrapped around her knees. She tried to think, to strategize. She was a scientist, a problem solver, but her thoughts were sluggish, thick as mud. Every potential plan, every flicker of an idea dissolved into a gray fog of futility. What was the point? The forest was a maze with no exit. Every path led to a new monster, a new trap. They had escaped the Legion only to be penned for something worse. Her gaze drifted to her pack. Her state-of-the-art equipment, the GPR, the LiDAR scanner, the soil density probes, seemed like absurd, useless trinkets from another reality. They were tools for measuring a world of rules and logic. This place operated on a different kind of physics, a physics of fear and folklore. She pulled out the evidence bag containing the Roman fibula. Through the plastic, the bronze eagle seemed to mock her, its eye a tiny, dark speck of metal. This was the catalyst. This was the object that had bought their doom. A cold, irrational anger flared within her. She wanted to hurl it into the black pond, to offer it to the waiting creature, to see if it would appease it. "Do not," Marcus said, his voice a low rasp. He had not moved from his spot near the edge of the circle, his axe resting on his shoulder, his eyes fixed on the silent man. "It does not want objects. It wants what is inside you." "What's the use, Marcus?" Lena's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "We're trapped. He led us here. The lantern man. He works for it. Or maybe he is part of it, a lure, like a deep-sea anglerfish." "He is a ghost like the others," Marcus said, "but he is bound to this place. He serves his master. He brings it food." He gestured with his chin towards the pond. "And that is where it keeps its trophies." Lena looked at the stilling pond. Its black, still surface was mesmerizing. As she stared into its depths, the water seemed to shift. It was no longer a reflectionless void. An image was forming. She saw herself, but not as she was. She was dressed in the tattered, spectral remnants of her hiking gear. Her skin was translucent, her eyes were wide and vacant. She was standing in a line with other figures. A man in medieval armor, a woman in a 19th century dress, a soldier in a Napoleonic uniform. They were all pale, all empty, and they were all staring at her with a look of profound, eternal hunger. She cried out and scrambled back, her heart hammering. "Did you see that?" Marcus nodded grimly. "I saw my own, dressed in my forestry uniform, my axe in my hand. But my eyes, they were not my own. The pond shows you what you will become if you give up. Another empty husk to serve the master of this place." The despair was a physical thing now, a heavy weight in Lena's chest. The silent man fed on this feeling. She could almost sense its satisfaction, a cold, predatory pleasure radiating across the clearing. They were dying, and their death was its nourishment. "No," she said, her voice a rebellious whisper. She would not give it the satisfaction. She would not be another empty face in the pond. She pushed herself to her feet, her body screaming in protest. Anger. She would hold on to anger. It was a better fuel than despair. "We have to fight it," she said, her voice gaining strength. "We can't just sit here and wait to be digested." "How?" Marcus asked, his own voice heavy with resignation. "We saw the Roman spear. Weapons do not touch it. It is not a physical thing." "The Roman, Varus, he fought it," Lena reasoned, her mind latching onto the memory. "His sword. It hurt the other creature, the Wurzel worm. It glowed. It was a weapon of will, not of steel. He said his will was stronger." "He is the legate of a cursed legion," Marcus countered. "He has had 2,000 years to practice. Our wills, they are tired and frightened." "Then we have to find a new weapon," Lena insisted, her eyes scanning the clearing. "The stones, the pond, the grass, her pack. Schmidt, he wanted the Aquila, the eagle standard. He said it was the linchpin, the heart of the curse." "And it is in the center of the Roman camp," Marcus reminded her, "surrounded by an army of the dead." "It's a chance," Lena said. "A target. It's better than sitting here and rotting from the inside out. We need to get out of this circle." As if in response to her defiance, the silent man moved. It did not walk. It simply flowed, its shadowy form gliding over the grass towards them. The temperature in the clearing plummeted. A frost began to form on the grass, spreading out from the creature's path. "It does not like that," Marcus observed, raising his axe. "It does not like the taste of hope." The creature stopped about 10 meters away. It raised both of its long, thin arms. The air crackled with a silent energy. Lena felt a pressure building in her mind, a psychic assault that threatened to overwhelm her newfound resolve. The faces from the pond flickered in her vision. The despair washed over her again, stronger this time, a tidal wave of hopelessness. She staggered, clutching her head. This was it. This was how it fed. It crushed your spirit until there was nothing left to fight with. But as she fell to her knees, her hand landed on her pack, on the hard, rectangular shape of her LiDAR scanner. The laser, a tool of light and measurement, an object of pure, dispassionate science. An idea, desperate and insane, sparked in her mind. "Marcus," she yelled, fumbling to unclip the device. The light, Varys's sword glowed. Maybe it's not about will, maybe it's about light. She aimed the scanner at the advancing creature and thumbed the activation switch. A dense grid of brilliant red laser dots sprayed across the silent man's form, mapping its shifting, unstable surface. The creature recoiled with a silent scream that tore through Lena's mind. Its shadowy form sizzled and smoked where the laser points touched it, like water on a hot skillet. The laser, a tool designed to create a 3D model of reality, was disrupting the creature's anti-reality. The pure, ordered light was anathema to the chaotic, emotional darkness it was made of. It worked. It was actually working. A wild, hysterical laugh escaped Lena's lips. The silent man dissolved, its form breaking apart into 1,000 wisps of black smoke that flowed back towards the pond and were sucked beneath its still surface. It was not defeated, but it had retreated. Lena collapsed, the heavy scanner falling from her grasp. The pressure in her mind vanished. The air grew warmer. The frost on the grass began to melt. Marcus rushed to her side, his face a mixture of awe and disbelief. "What did you do?" "Science," Lena gasped, a delirious grin on her face. "I hit it with science." They were not powerless. They had a weapon. It was a temporary reprieve, she knew. The creature would be back, but now they had a way to fight it. They had a way to get out of the circle. "Okay," she said, getting to her feet, her body energized by the victory. "New plan. We are no longer the prey. We are going on the offensive." She looked at Marcus, her eyes burning with a feverish intensity. "We are going to find the Roman camp. We are going to steal their eagle. And we are going to use it to burn this entire forest to the ground." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. He saw the fire in her eyes, the ragged edge of someone who had been pushed past their breaking point and had come out the other side, harder and more dangerous. He looked at the axe in his hands, then back at her. A slow, grim smile touched his lips for the first time. "All right, Frailene Doctor," he said, "let's go hunting." Chapter 8. The Whispering Bullets. Leaving the false sanctuary of the stone circle was like plunging back into a cold, dark sea. The oppressive weight of the forest settled back onto them, a physical pressure that muffled sound and stole the warmth from their bodies. The sense of being watched returned, 1,000 unseen eyes peering from the shadows between the trees. But this time, it was different. Lena carried the LiDAR scanner like a loaded weapon, its angular, metallic form a talisman of logic against the encroaching madness. They were no longer just fleeing. They had a purpose. Their goal was the Praetorium, the heart of the Roman camp. According to Schmidt, that was where Varys kept the Aquila. But the forest was a pathless, shifting labyrinth. They had no map, no compass, and no sense of direction. "How do we find it?" Lena asked, her voice low. They moved slowly, carefully, every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig setting their nerves on edge. "We follow the war," Marcus replied, his gaze sweeping the forest floor. "A battle leaves scars, not just on the ground but on the place itself. We look for the signs." He pointed to the trunk of a massive pine. Halfway up its side was a deep, circular hole, its edges splintered and black. Cannonball from the Swedes, maybe, or Napoleon's army. They fought here too. A few meters further on, he indicated a series of parallel gouges in the earth, almost completely overgrown but still visible if you knew what to look for. A trench. The one we saw the gaper digging was new. This one is old, from the first big war. They were walking through a palimpsest of conflict, the ground itself a historical document written in blood and iron. They began to find more signs. A rusted, skeletal bayonet tangled in the roots of a tree. The corroded brass casing of a Mauser shell, green with age. A small, lead musket ball, flattened on one side from its impact 2 centuries ago. Lena picked up the musket ball. It was heavy, dense. As her fingers closed around it, a whisper echoed in her mind. It was not a sound, but a direct impression, a phantom sensation. For the Emperor, fire. The voice was French, filled with a zealous fervor. It was followed by a flash of imagery, the faces of red-coated soldiers, a line of smoke, a sharp, sudden pain in the chest. It was the last moment of the soldier who had fired this bullet, or been killed by it. She dropped the lead ball as if it were burning hot, her hand trembling. "Did you?" Marcus nodded, his face grim. He held up a spent rifle cartridge. "Got mit uns," he whispered, the last thought of a German soldier. The whispering bullets. The memories are trapped here too. The strong ones, the ones from the moment of death. They get soaked into the land, into the objects. The forest was not just a prison for ghosts. It was an archive of death, a library of last moments. Every artifact was a recording. The thought was deeply unsettling, but it gave Lena an idea. "The fibula," she said, pulling the evidence bag from her pack. "The Roman brooch. If these small things hold a memory, what does that hold?" She hesitated for a moment, then opened the bag and took out the bronze eagle. It was cold to the touch, its weight substantial in her palm. She closed her eyes and focused, trying to listen not with her ears, but with her mind, as she had with the musket ball. At first there was nothing. Then a low hum began in her consciousness. It was not a single voice, but a multitude, a chorus of hundreds of voices all speaking at once, a torrent of disciplined, determined Latin. It was the collective consciousness of the first cohort, the original ghosts of the Ninth Legion. The voices were a chaotic flood of orders, prayers, curses, and boasts. "Hold the line, for the glory of Rome, the eagle watches, do not falter." "My shield is heavy, my arm aches, just one more charge." "I see them in the trees, so many." "Ave Caesar, mortuary te salutant." "Hail Caesar, those who are about to die salute you." The sheer volume of it was overwhelming, a psychic tsunami. But underneath the chaos there was a single unifying thread, a sense of direction, a pull. It was like a magnetic field drawing her towards a specific point. It was the aquila. The fibula, a lesser artifact of the Legion, was being drawn to its source, the primary totem of their power. "I can feel it," she said, her eyes snapping open. She pointed into the dense woods. "It's that way. I can feel the eagle." They had a compass now. A morbid, spectral compass, but a compass nonetheless. They began to move in the direction of the psychic pull, Lena holding the fibula in her hand, guiding them through the trees. The feeling grew stronger as they advanced, the chorus of Roman voices in her head becoming louder, more distinct. She started to recognize individual voices, individual personalities within the ghostly choir. There was a grim, fatalistic centurion, a young, terrified Optio, a cynical, foul-mouthed legionary. She was navigating by the souls of the dead. The character of the forest began to change again. The trees grew in straighter, more orderly lines. The ground was flatter, more even. They were entering the area of the Roman camp, the castra. The signs of modern warfare faded, replaced by ancient ones. They passed a series of deep pits, their bottoms filled with sharpened, fire-hardened stakes, a Roman defensive ditch, a fossa. A little further on, they saw the remains of a wall, a collapsed earthwork rampart that would have once been topped with a wooden palisade. The pull from the fibula was almost painfully strong now. The voices in Lena's head were a deafening roar. They were close. They took cover behind the collapsed rampart, peering over the top. Before them was a large, open space, the former heart of the Roman camp. In the center stood the ruins of a large, tent-like structure, its stone foundation still intact, the Praetorium. The air here was thick with spectral energy, shimmering and distorting like a heat haze. Ghostly legionaries patrolled the perimeter, their forms more solid, more defined than any they had seen before. These were the elites, the Praetorian Guard of the dead. And in the very center of the ruins, planted in the earth like a spear, was the Aquila. It was magnificent and terrifying. A life-sized eagle, sculpted from what looked like solid silver, perched atop a long wooden pole. It was not merely an object, it was a nexus of power. It glowed with a blinding internal light, the same cold, silver light as Varus's sword. It was the source. It was the anchor that held this entire nightmare in place. Guarding it, standing motionless before the standard, was Legate Varus himself. He was not alone. Flanking him were two massive figures in plate armor, their greatswords resting on their shoulders. One was Sir Kuno the Iron-Greaved, the penitent Teutonic knight. The other was a similarly imposing figure Lena did not recognize. And just behind them, leaning against a ruined wall with an air of bored detachment, was the one-eyed Napoleonic grenadier, Jean-Pierre Le Corbeau. Getting to the eagle would be suicide. "There are too many," Marcus whispered, his voice tight. "We could never get past them." As they watched, a new figure entered the clearing. It was a flickering, unstable apparition in a tattered WWII-era uniform. It shuffled forward and knelt before Varus, its head bowed. Even from a distance, Lena could see it was a new recruit, its form still glitching, its connection to this reality tenuous. Varus looked down at the kneeling ghost. He said something in Latin, his voice too low to hear. Then he touched the butt of the Aquila's staff to the ghost's head. A flash of silver light arced from the eagle into the recruit. The ghost convulsed, its form solidifying, its flickering ceasing. It stood up, its movements now crisp and disciplined. It was no longer a confused, glitching specter. It was a soldier. Varus had just initiated it into the cohort. "He uses it to bind them," Lena breathed, "to stabilize them, to make them part of his army." Schmidt had been right, the Aquila was the key. But how could they possibly get to it? They were outmatched and outnumbered. As this thought of hopelessness crossed Lena's mind, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The chorus of Roman voices in her head suddenly spiked, focusing on a single shared emotion: fear. The forest bleeds, the ground trembles, the horned one comes. A deep, guttural bellow echoed from the woods behind them, a sound of primal rage and ancient pain. The ground shook. The spectral legionaries in the clearing stopped their patrols, turning as one to face the direction of the sound. Even Varus looked up from his new recruit, a flicker of something other than arrogance on his severe face. Crashing through the trees, its massive form splintering ancient oaks as if they were matchsticks, came the Hirschgeist, the stag ghost. It was even more horrifying up close. It was a colossal beast, a creature of rot and bone, its antlers a grotesque crown of rusted metal and human remains. Its eyes burned with a malevolent green light. It was not a ghost in the same way the soldiers were. It was a physical entity, a piece of the forest's rage given flesh and bone. It let out another roar and charged into the clearing. It was not attacking Lena and Marcus. It was attacking the Romans. It seemed to view their orderly, unnatural presence as a cancer within its domain. "The forest is fighting back," Marcus whispered in awe. The legionaries formed a shield wall, bracing for the impact. The Hirschgeist slammed into them with the force of a runaway truck. The spectral shields shattered, and the front line of soldiers dissolved into mist. The beast trampled through them, its massive hooves crushing ghosts into nothingness. Varus shouted a command, and his elite guards moved to engage. The two knights charged forward, their huge spectral swords swinging. Le Corbeau, the grenadier, unslung his phantom musket and fired, the shot making a dull thud as it struck the creature's hide, leaving a smoking black hole that quickly healed over. The battle was a chaotic, terrifying spectacle, the primal fury of the forest against the disciplined order of the spectral army. And in that chaos, Lena saw their chance. All eyes, living and dead, were on the Hirschgeist. No one was looking at the Aquila. "Now," she said to Marcus, her heart pounding. "It's now or never." Chapter 9. The Heart of the Legion. Chaos was their only cover. While the primal rage of the Hirschgeist crashed against the disciplined lines of the spectral legion, a narrow corridor of opportunity opened. Lena and Marcus broke from their cover behind the ruined rampart, sprinting across the open ground of the castra. They ran low, their feet sinking into earth that had been soaked with the blood and despair of centuries. The noise was deafening. The monstrous bellows of the stag ghost mixed with the Latin war cries of the legionaries, the clash of phantom steel, and the splintering of ancient trees. The air was electric, a storm of conflicting energies that made Lena's teeth ache and her hair stand on end. Their target was the ruined Praetorium, the stone foundation where the Aquila stood like a spear driven into the heart of the world. 50 meters, 40, 30. No one noticed them. Every spectral eye was locked on the titanic struggle between the forest's avatar and the legion's commander. Circuno the Iron-Greaved swung his massive greatsword, a spectral arc of silver light, against the Hirschgeist's leg. The blade passed through the limb with no effect. The beast swatted him aside like a fly, sending the spectral knight tumbling through the air to dissolve against the far wall of the camp. Varus himself was now engaged, his glowing gladius a blur of motion as he darted in and out, stabbing at the creature's joints, his movements impossibly fast and precise. 20 meters, 10. They reached the edge of the stone foundation. The Aquila was right there, planted in a mound of hard-packed earth in the center of the ruin. Its silver light was blinding up close, pulsing with a silent, immense power. The chorus of Roman voices in Lena's head, the ones from the fibula, screamed in protest and alarm at their proximity, a psychic wall of pure hostility. Profani tange non, gloria eterna defilers do not touch eternal glory. Lena gritted her teeth, pushing through the mental assault. She reached the mound of earth and wrapped her hands around the thick, wooden pole of the standard. The moment her living flesh touched it, two things happened at once. First, a bolt of pure, icy energy shot up her arms and into her body, a shockwave of 2,000 years of condensed duty, rage, and despair. It was not just an object, it was a battery of souls. The collective will of the entire lost legion flooded her senses. She saw it all in a flash. The long march into the dark German forests, the growing fear, the brutal decimation at the stone, the final, hopeless battle against the Germanic tribes, the moment of their death, and the horrifying realization that it was not the end. She felt their eternal torment, the endless repetition of their failure. The weight of it was absolute, and she nearly blacked out. Second, every single spectral soldier in the forest, regardless of their era or allegiance, stopped what they were doing. Varus froze, his sword halfway through a thrust. The Hirschgeist paused, its massive head tilted in confusion. The legionaries, the knights, the grenadier, they all turned their heads as one, and they all stared directly at Lena. The living had touched the heart of the legion. A new voice, deeper and more powerful than all the others combined, echoed not in her head but in the air around her, a voice of pure, absolute command. It was the voice of the Aquila itself. INTRUSOR, release, JUDGMENT. Lena, pull, Marcus yelled, his face pale with terror. He grabbed the pole alongside her. His touch added his own life force to the equation. They heaved together, straining against the immense weight of the standard. It was not just heavy, it was anchored to the very soil by centuries of ritual and bloodshed. The ground around it cracked. With a final, agonized groan, the Aquila came free. The instant it left the earth, a shockwave of silver light erupted from the hole where it had been planted, expanding outwards across the entire forest. The world went white. The sound of 1,000 voices screaming in unison filled the air. When Lena's vision cleared, the forest was changed. The spectral combatants were gone. Varus, the Hirschgeist, the soldiers, all had vanished. The oppressive weight of the forest, the psychic pressure, had lifted. For the first time, she could hear the sound of a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the trees. The war, for a moment, had stopped. But the Aquila in their hands was a terrible, living thing. It pulsed with a malevolent energy, its silver eagle head turning on the pole, its metallic eyes fixing on Lena. The voices were still in her head, but they were no longer a chaotic chorus. They were a single, unified consciousness, controlled by the eagle, and they were furious. "What have we done?" Marcus gasped, staring at the empty clearing. "We've taken the king off the chessboard," Lena said. her knuckles white where she gripped the pole. The power coursing through her was terrifying, intoxicating. Now all the other pieces don't know what to do. Her theory was proven a moment later. A figure shimmered into existence at the edge of the clearing. It was the trench gaper, the WWI soldier. He no longer held his spade. He stood looking around, a lost, confused expression on his hollow face. Another figure appeared, the glitch hiker, Katrin Bach. Her form was stable now, no longer flickering. The walkman was silent. She looked down at her own translucent hands with a dawning horror, as if seeing herself for the first time. By removing the Aquila, the central command unit, they had broken the curse's primary protocol. The ghosts were no longer soldiers in an endless war. They were just ghosts, lost souls trapped in a nightmare from which they were slowly, terrifyingly waking up. But their moment of triumph was short-lived. Two figures materialized in the center of the praetorium, not with a shimmer, but with a sharp crackle of displaced air. Varys and Schmidt. They were no longer fighting each other. They were both staring at the Aquila in Lena's hands with an identical expression of ravenous hunger. "She has it," Varys breathed, his voice filled with a terrible awe. "The flesh and blood has mastered the standard." "No," Schmidt corrected him, a predatory smile spreading across his face. "She has stolen the crown, but she does not have the head to wear it." He took a step forward. "Give it to me, Fräulein Vogel. You have no idea the power you are holding. You will burn from the inside out. I can control it. I can use it to end this, to free us all." "Liar," Varys roared, his form blazing with a silver light. "You would enslave us all to your own twisted ambition. The Aquila belongs to the Legion. It belongs to me." They both began to advance, their temporary truce forgotten, their rivalry reignited over the ultimate prize. Lena and Marcus were caught between them, holding a weapon of immense power that they had no idea how to use, a weapon that was actively trying to consume their minds. The Roman voices, directed by the eagle, screamed at her to return it, to impale herself upon it, to give her life force to restore the eternal war. "What do we do?" Marcus yelled over the psychic din. Lena's eyes darted around. They couldn't fight them both. They couldn't control the eagle, and giving it to either of them was unthinkable. There was only one option left: not control, not surrender, destruction. "The decimation stone," she yelled back, an idea born of pure desperation forming in her mind. Schmidt said the eagle was the antenna, the stone. The stone was the amplifier, where the curse took hold. We have to take it there. "And do what?" "I don't know," she screamed, her mind feeling like it was being torn apart. "Break it, cross the streams, I don't know, it's the only chance we have." Holding the terrible, pulsing standard between them, they turned and ran from the praetorium, plunging back into the now silent, but no less dangerous, woods. Behind them, the two most powerful beings in the forest gave chase, their ancient rivalry momentarily sublimated by their shared, desperate need to reclaim the heart of the Legion. Chapter 10: An Alliance of Monsters. The forest was eerily silent as they ran. The absence of the spectral battle was more unnerving than its presence had been. It was the silence of a held breath, of a world waiting for a new, more terrible catastrophe to begin. Lena and Marcus crashed through the undergrowth, the heavy Aquila an awkward, terrible burden between them. Its pulsing energy was a constant drain, leaching the warmth from their bodies and the strength from their limbs. The unified, commanding voice of the eagle screamed in Lena's mind, a constant psychic barrage demanding its return. Behind them they could hear their pursuers. Varus moved with the heavy, rhythmic tread of a marching soldier. Schmidt was a more subtle presence, a whisper of displaced air, a fleeting shadow in their peripheral vision. They were not fighting each other now. They had formed a temporary, unholy alliance with a single goal: to reclaim the Aquila. "We'll never outrun them," Marcus panted, his breath fogging in the cold air. The axe he had slung over his shoulder seemed like a child's toy compared to the power they now carried. "We don't have to," Lena replied, her teeth chattering from the eagle's energy drain. "We just have to get to the stone first." She was navigating by a grim instinct, following the trail of psychic poison that led back to the place where the curse had been born. The fibula in her pocket was now cold and inert, its connection severed, but the memory of the stone's location was burned into her mind. They burst into a small clearing and skidded to a halt. They were not alone. A group of ghosts was gathered there, standing aimlessly among the trees. There was a medieval knight, a Wehrmacht soldier, and a handful of Roman legionaries, all looking lost and confused. The knight was staring at his own gauntleted hands. The German soldier was looking up at the sky. They were no longer an army. They were a disoriented crowd. As Lena and Marcus appeared, carrying the glowing eagle, the ghosts all turned. A flicker of recognition, of old programming, crossed their faces. The legionaries instinctively began to form a line. The German soldier raised his hand in a tentative salute. They were drawn to the symbol of their former bondage. "Get back," Lena shouted, her voice hoarse. Before the ghosts could react, Varus and Schmidt arrived. They appeared at the edge of the clearing, their forms sharp and menacing. "My soldiers," Varus commanded, his voice booming with authority. "The barbarians have stolen our standard. Seize it, seize them." The Roman legionaries snapped to attention. Their confusion was replaced by the familiar, comforting certainty of an order. They began to advance on Lena and Marcus, their ghostly pila held at the ready. Schmidt laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "You see, Freiolin, you cannot win. Even broken, they answer to their master." He looked at the German and the knight. "And as for you two, you have a choice. Join the winning side or be erased. What will it be?" The Wehrmacht soldier hesitated, then his shoulders slumped, and he shuffled to stand behind Schmidt. The knight, however, looked from Varus to Schmidt, then at the pulsating eagle. He shook his head, a gesture of profound weariness. "No more masters," he muttered, and his form dissolved into a fine mist, choosing oblivion over continued service. The legionaries were closing in. Lena and Marcus were surrounded. "It's over," Marcus said, his voice heavy with defeat. "No, it's not," Lena countered, her mind racing. The eagle in her hands was a weapon. She just had to figure out how to fire it. She remembered the flash of light when she had pulled it from the ground, the wave of energy that had temporarily banished every ghost. How did she replicate that? She focused her will not on the eagle's commanding voice, but on the raw power that flowed through it, the stored energy of 2 millennia of suffering. She tried to push that energy outwards, to release it. The eagle's silver head began to glow brighter. The air crackled. The advancing legionaries hesitated, sensing the buildup of power. "Obey," the eagle screamed in her mind, fighting her. "Return, duty." "I am not one of your soldiers." Lena screamed back, pouring all of her fear, her anger, her grief for Ben into a single point of defiant will. A pulse of silver light, smaller than the first but still powerful, erupted from the aquila. It washed over the advancing legionaries. They staggered back, their forms flickering violently, their discipline broken. The psychic feedback shot up Lena's arms, and she cried out in pain, nearly dropping the standard. It had worked, but it had taken a heavy toll. Varys looked shocked. A barbarian, a woman, had bent the aquila to her will. It was an insult to 2,000 years of Roman authority. Schmidt looked intrigued, a hungry, calculating expression in his eyes. The momentary respite gave them the opening they needed. They broke through the disrupted line of ghosts and plunged back into the woods, leaving the 2 monstrous commanders behind. They ran, pushing their bodies to the absolute limit. The forest around them was filled with lost souls. They saw the trench gaper, sitting on the edge of the trench he had dug, weeping silent, dusty tears. They saw the Hussar phantoms, their skeletal horses standing motionless, their riders staring blankly into the distance. They even caught a glimpse of the ghost of Ben Carter, the glitch hiker, flickering at the edge of their vision, the spectral pilum still in his chest. He looked at them with an expression of infinite sadness before vanishing. Finally, they stumbled into the clearing of the decimation stone. It sat in the center of the blighted patch of ground, a squat, malevolent altar of pain. It seemed to hum with a dark energy, a perfect counterpoint to the silver light of the aquila. "This is it," Lena panted, collapsing against the stone. Its surface was cold as ice. The psychic pull she had felt here before was now a roaring vortex, amplified by the presence of the eagle. This was the place, the wound. Marcus leaned on the standard, his chest heaving. "What now, Fraeline Doctor? What is the plan?" Lena looked from the glowing eagle in their hands to the dark, malevolent stone. One was the antenna that broadcast the curse. The other was the amplifier where it had first taken root. What would happen if they were brought together with force? What happens when you cross the streams of 2 opposing, supernatural forces? "I think," she began, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and insane hope, "I think we have to perform an exorcism. With an axe." Before Marcus could question her, Varys and Schmidt arrived. They stepped into the clearing, their alliance apparently intact. They did not attack. They simply stood watching. "This is your final mistake, barbarian," Varys said, his voice calm. "You have brought our most sacred relic to this place of shame. You will not leave this circle alive." "It's over, Fraeline," Schmidt said, his tone almost gentle. "You have been magnificent, truly, but you are mortal. Your strength is failing. The eagle will consume you. Give it to me. I will use its power to unmake this place. I swear it." Lena looked at the two of them, the tyrant and the traitor, the cage and the abyss. There was no good choice, so she would make her own. "Marcus," she said, her voice clear and steady, "get ready." She took a deep breath. She and Marcus lifted the heavy Aquila together, holding it horizontally. They used the last of their strength to raise it high above their heads. "What are they doing?" Varys asked, a note of uncertainty in his voice. "Something foolish," Schmidt replied, a flicker of concern on his face. Lena looked at Marcus. He nodded, his jaw set. "For Ben," he said. "For all of them," she replied. With a final, desperate war cry, they swung the glowing eagle of the 9th Legion down with all their might, aiming the silver, pulsing heart of the curse directly at the black, unholy surface of the decimation stone. Chapter 11. The Unraveling. The impact was not a sound. It was a cessation of it. The moment the silver Aquila struck the dark, corrupted surface of the decimation stone, a wave of absolute silence washed over the forest, a pressure that made the ears pop and the lungs ache. It was as if the world had been suddenly plunged into a vacuum. The two opposing artifacts, the totem of eternal duty and the altar of eternal shame, had met, and reality itself held its breath. Lena and Marcus were thrown back by a concussive force that had no sound, landing in a heap on the blighted earth. The Aquila lay where it had fallen, half on the stone, half off, the silver of the eagle and the black of the rock touching. There was no explosion of light, no cataclysmic blast. There was only a deep, resonant hum, a single, pure note that vibrated not in the air, but in the very substance of the world. The decimation stone began to glow, not with the cold, silver light of the eagle, but with a dark, angry, crimson light that pulsed from the ancient Roman numerals carved into its surface. Cracks, spiderwebbing with red energy spread across its face. The Aquila, in turn, began to flicker violently, its silver form wavering as if its integrity was failing. The two artifacts were locked in a death struggle, a feedback loop of immense power, and they were tearing each other apart. Varys let out a roar of fury and anguish. "No, what have you done? You are destroying it. You are destroying us." He lunged forward, not at Lena, but at the warring artifacts, his hands outstretched to save the symbol of his identity. But as he drew near, the conflicting energies washed over him. His solid, corporeal form began to unravel. The sharp lines of his armor blurred, his crimson cloak became a transparent wisp of color, and his face contorted in agony as 2,000 years of rigid, disciplined existence came undone. He was being erased. Schmidt was more cautious. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, a look of horrified fascination on his face. "Incredible," he whispered. "She didn't cross the streams. She smashed the two reactors together. She's initiated a full system collapse." He understood immediately what was happening. They were not just destroying the artifacts, they were pulling the plug on the entire anomaly. A wind began to blow through the forest, a wind that carried voices. Not the disciplined Latin of the Legion, but a cacophony of whispers from every soul trapped in the woods. German, French, Swedish, Latin, Celtic, a chorus of the lost, all whispering a single final word: goodbye. All across the forest, the ghosts were coming undone. Their forms grew thin, transparent. The trench gaper looked up from his trench, a slow, peaceful smile spreading across his hollow face as he faded into the wind. The Landsknecht piper lowered his fife, gave a final, jaunty bow to an unseen audience, and dissolved into motes of light. The hussar phantoms and their skeletal steeds reared up one last time before vanishing like smoke. The curse was unraveling. The prison was collapsing, and its inmates were finally being set free. Varus, in his final moments, reached the stone. He placed his hands upon the flickering Aquila, a captain determined to go down with his ship. "The Legion is eternal," he whispered, his voice cracking, losing its authority. His form dissolved completely, leaving nothing behind but a faint, lingering scent of ozone and ancient pride. Schmidt watched him go, a complex expression on his face, part triumph, part terror. He had outlasted his ancient rival, but his own existence was now measured in seconds. He turned his piercing gaze on Lena, who was struggling to her feet. "You have truly done it, Fraeuline Doctor," he said, his voice weaker now, his immaculate uniform beginning to fray at the edges, turning into mist. "You have ruined everything, so magnificent." He gave her a final, genuine smile, a flash of the ambitious, brilliant, evil man he had been. "I would have remade the world. It would have been beautiful." With that, Sturmbannführer Eugen Schmidt, the usurper, faded away, his ambition turning to nothing on the whispering wind. The crimson glow from the decimation stone pulsed one last time, and with a final, deep groan, the ancient rock crumbled into a pile of black dust and red embers. The Aquila, its light extinguished, its silver tarnished and blackened, cracked down the middle and fell apart, a dead, broken thing. The silence that followed was different. It was not the oppressive, predatory silence from before. It was a true, natural quiet. The hum was gone. The pressure was gone. The feeling of being watched was gone. Somewhere in the distance, for the first time since they had entered the forest, a bird began to sing. Lena and Marcus stood in the center of the clearing, surrounded by the dust of ghosts and shattered artifacts. It was over. It was finally over. Lena looked at Marcus. The old guide was staring up at the canopy, his weathered face streaked with dirt and tears. He was listening to the bird song, a sound he had not truly heard in his own forest for years. "Is it done?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I think so," Lena replied, her body numb, her mind a hollowed-out cavern. As the last of the unnatural energy faded from the clearing, a final apparition appeared before them. It was Ben Carter, the ghost of Ben. The spectral pilum was gone from his chest. He was no longer flickering. He looked solid, real, just as he had that morning, his camera still on its harness. He looked at Lena, and his face was not filled with malice or emptiness, but with a profound and gentle sadness. "You did it," he said, his voice his own again, free of the electronic monotone. "You actually did it." "Ben," Lena choked out, tears welling in her eyes, "I'm so sorry." "It's okay," he said, a faint, sad smile on his lips. "I got the finale. It was epic." He looked around at the peaceful forest. "It's quiet now. The screaming has stopped." He raised a translucent hand and waved. "Tell them, tell my subscribers, to like and subscribe." And with that final, characteristic piece of bravado, his form grew faint, lifted on the breeze, and was gone. Lena finally let herself collapse, her legs giving way. She sobbed not from fear, but from a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight. Grief for Ben, for the centuries of trapped souls, for the piece of herself she had lost in these dark woods. Marcus walked over and put a heavy, comforting hand on her shoulder. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. They simply stayed there for a long time, two survivors in the quiet, empty heart of a vanquished nightmare, listening to the birds sing. Chapter 12. The Weight of Dawn. They walked out of the forest as the sun began to rise. For the first time, its rays penetrated the thick canopy, dappling the forest floor in warm, golden light. The trees no longer looked like monstrous, watching sentinels. They were just trees. The path they had lost reappeared, a simple, clear track leading them back towards the world they had left behind. They did not speak. The shared trauma was a chasm between them that words could not bridge. They were bound by what they had endured, but also isolated by it. How could you explain to anyone what had happened? How could you describe the taste of despair, the sound of a spectral machine gun, the weight of a 2,000-year-old curse? When they reached the edge of the forest, where they had parked their vehicle what felt like a lifetime ago, the mundane reality of it was a shock. The car was just a car. The road was just a road. The world had kept turning while they had been trapped in a pocket of hell. Marcus stopped at the tree line. He turned and looked back into the now peaceful woods. "I have lived my whole life in the shadow of that place," he said, his voice soft. "Feared it, respected it, hated it. Now it is just the Schwarzswald again." He looked at Lena. "What will you do?" Lena thought of her paper, her academic theories, her carefully constructed, logical world. It was all rubble now, as surely as the decimation stone. "I don't know," she admitted. "I came here to debunk a myth, but you can't debunk a scar." She looked at her hands. They were scraped and bruised, but they felt clean. The phantom sensation of the Aquila's power was gone. She reached into her pack and pulled out her phone. It was dead. She had no recordings, no photographs, no proof of what had happened. There was only the testimony of a traumatized academic and a grizzled old forester, and Ben's footage, which was gone with him. No one would ever believe them. And maybe, she thought, that was for the best. Some stories should not be told. Some doors, once closed, should never be reopened. "I think I'm going home," she said. Marcus nodded. He gave her a long, searching look, a silent acknowledgement of the abyss they had stared into together. He turned and walked towards a small woodsman's cottage on the edge of the forest, his home, without a backward glance. He did not need proof. He had the quiet in his woods. It was enough. Lena got into the car. She sat for a long moment, her hands on the steering wheel, her mind empty. The journey was over. The story was finished. She had survived. But survival, she was beginning to understand, was not always a victory. It was a sentence to remember. She started the car, the engine's roar a comforting, mechanical sound. As she pulled away, she glanced in her rearview mirror. For a split second, she thought she saw a figure standing at the edge of the forest, a tall man in a severe black uniform, smiling a cold, final smile before fading away. She blinked, and he was gone. It was just a trick of the light, a phantom of her exhausted mind. She turned her eyes to the road ahead and drove, leaving the Schwarzswald and its newly silent ghosts behind her. The sun was rising, casting long shadows on the road. The weight of the forest was gone, but a new weight had taken its place. The weight of the dawn and of all the dawns that would follow, each one a reminder of the darkness she now knew the world contained. The war was over, but the haunting had just begun. The end.